Hello. This video is on emotional enmeshment, in particular, emotional parentification, which means that often families where there is a troubled marriage, there's a troubled relationship between the parents. Either there could be a divorce, or one of the parents could just be absent because he's away on work. Any of these reasons where one of the parents basically treats the child as a surrogate. It could involve a variety of behaviors, which could be either just depending on them emotionally for support that you would normally seek from your partner. It could also involve putting like responsibilities on them, whether financial, whether just like household chores to help out. Um, the distinction can be difficult to define in certain cases, but it usually is when there is too much responsibility put on the child. Of course, parents ask children to do normal household chores. That's completely like normal, expected, okay. But then when it crosses over into the territory where the parent is completely or relying, completely dependent or relying to great extent on the child to fulfill those needs, whether emotional, whether financial, whether caretaking of the house, just doing like random chores, but where it goes to like a degree beyond what children usually do, then it compromises the child's ability to grow psychologically, mentally, emotionally. It puts the needs of the parents before the child, where there is a role reversal because the parent is the one who is supposed to take care of the child and not the other way around. And in this situation, it is the child that is taking care of the parent at the cost of the child themselves. And then there are other aspects to it that come in, that the child may feel special, chosen because out of perhaps other siblings, or because perhaps they're getting this important role of being a parent and they feel like wiser beyond their years. They may feel like this is a privilege to them to be in this position, but then there may also be anger, resentment, frustration, feeling weird, which may eventually go away because it just becomes more normalized to be in that position, especially when you stop being a teenager. You can, by that time, you can just become really used to that. And the thing is, because you have never had healthy boundaries, you may be overly attached to your parent. This can happen between same genders, can happen as in same gender parent and child, whether it's a mother who has been divorced and she's finding it difficult to deal with life, whether emotionally or just financially or just taking care of the house, or a variety of other things that come up in normal daily life. And then she decides to use the child, or the child just steps up to the occasion themselves and becomes like more mature in a lot of cases in the parent. They may be hiding a lot of anxiety, but to the outside world, it seems that they have taken this caretaker role, and often they are, like actually other people may see like what a responsible boy, and usually there is this good boy or good girl facade in which behind which this child starts feeling comfortable. It becomes their role, and then later on in life they find it difficult to express their real self. They find it difficult to express what their needs are without feeling guilty. They may still usually they don't really break away from that role themselves. They, of course, are still stuck in that role beyond that time period. And even if they move away, they may, of course, be stuck in that role beyond the duration of even like living with that particular parent, because they have already formed this template, this program, this code, which operates under certain conditions, and they are tied down whether through guilt, shame, just feeling that this is what they're supposed to do emotionally, mentally, in every way. And when they enter into different relationships, of course, these problems surface, they come to light because they have not gone away, they have perhaps been suppressed. Usually in the early phases of a relationship, those just like the natural chemicals that you get from a relationship, whether endorphins, oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, all these things may be so overwhelming, they may be so strong that usually they can overwhelm, they can like transcend that original programming, they may go above and beyond that. But then later, what happens is that you come back into that same role. A lot of people may also experience difficulties just being with stable partners. They may choose instead to have random, like, sexual partners rather than be in relationships. Other people who enter relationships may find it very difficult to do things for their partner, because whenever they feel like they're being burdened by their partner, they just want to escape that situation. It makes them feel uncomfortable. They have this fear of being engulfed, overwhelmed, because they've never had boundaries. They've never been taught boundaries, because boundaries are taught by the people who love us. And a lot of the times, these parents themselves grew up in situations where they did not have these boundaries for themselves. So, hence, of course, it's really difficult for them to teach these boundaries or know where these boundaries even start or end, in terms of like realizing that your child, someone you're supposed to cater for, cater to their needs. There's so many needs that are there. I'm going to do a separate video on childhood emotional developmental needs, but just to talk briefly about them, they are the need to feel safe, the need to feel that you can emotionally express yourself, the need to feel that your emotions are validated, which means that they matter, that you are seen for who you are, that you're appreciated for who you are, not what you do, because what you do is just your worth should come from just being you, innately you, not from what you can do for the parent. Instead, it is the parent's responsibility. That is their burden. That is what they have signed up for, which is to take care of you. It is not your job to be the parent to stabilize them in any certain way, to take care of their needs. And this can happen a lot as well if the parent is old, or one of the parents is old or disabled, or maybe they're having financial difficulties. They're sorry, my face is itchy. So there may be a lot of reasons why this is happening. But then again, it really stunts the child's ability to develop a sense of self, to understand who they are as a person beyond that role. They may feel Usually they feel obliged their entire lives to keep fulfilling this role unless they actually go to proper therapy, work on it. And even then, it's like an addiction they'll always be susceptible to. So they always have to be aware of it, because as soon as they stop trying to work on it, they slack off. Being aware of it and trying to identify it, trying to use the strategies they learn as healthy coping mechanisms. It could also be like life events, such as all of a sudden that parent is ill, and then they just feel like they have to rush in and go there. That parent may be going through an emotional crisis, and they may ask that kid to show up. This kid feels, as an adult, even compelled to drop everything, drop their marriage, their children, because that has been their protector provider role for so long as a surrogate parent, that they don't know how to break away. They don't know how to stand their own ground, be independent. Whenever they do, they feel very guilty. They don't know what their emotional needs are. They don't know how to stop taking blame, how to stop taking extra responsibility, how to have relationships of their own. So, as soon as they discover difficulties in their own relationships, they just want to cut off because it reminds them of all the associated trauma, and also it reminds them, sorry, I haven't slept, so just being itchy. This fan, this little hair. My skin is really sensitive, so it's just kind of bothering me. So there's a lot of ways this can show up. There could be like inappropriate conversations with them, discussing like financial difficulties, discussing even like some parents discuss sexual difficulties. Some parents may go into sexualizing the child by talking about how beautiful he is, how handsome he is. He's the most handsome boy. Kids may feel uncomfortable, but they don't really know what is healthy, what is not, just apart from this feeling of discomfort. But then at another level, they realize that it's also a survival mechanism because all children who are neglected feel this sense of Stockholm syndrome, that they feel completely completely indebted, in love with their parents, and that has a survival mechanism element, the same way being a surrogate parent does, which is that if they realize that if they want their needs fulfilled, if they need to survive, they need to meet that parent's needs, and it gives them hope to be able to do that because they feel like I'm the reason for the neglect. And if I could be a little better, a little more responsible, a little more there providing for them, then maybe like they would treat me better. So this is the fantasy that someone with Stockholm syndrome has in the parent-child dynamic, which is that, excuse me, um, which is that one day my parents will see me, they will recognize me, they will realize what a great person I am. I will get that validation I always sought. And for that, they keep on trying, they keep on hoping. Of course, only to usually fall greater. Sorry, I'm just recovering from this cough. To get water. Um, so, yeah. Usually they realize that part of the Stockholm syndrome is feeling like the way children see emotions is how they experience it, which is very subjective, non objective. So, as a child, you usually say that there's something wrong with me, you internalize shame, guilt, and then usually usually you're more susceptible and prone to it. So basically, you are prone to guilt trips, you're prone to shaming, and you stay stuck in this dynamic of trying to prove to your parents and essentially to yourself that you matter, that you're worth being loved, that you deserve love. And the crazy thing about this trauma bonding is that instead of obviously realizing, because to realize that your parents are not fulfilling their roles, you need to know a lot of things which usually children don't know, which is what is the role of a parent, what are they supposed to provide for you, how is that supposed to work in a healthy dynamic versus an unhealthy one where they are providing things but they're making you feel guilty, or they are providing for some of your needs but they're neglecting others, or they're providing for some but they're very making you feel terrible, they're making you feel like you should be grateful, you don't deserve this, you have ruined my life. A lot of parents, when they have troubled marriages, they can project that onto their children and tell their children that if you hadn't been born, I would have had a great life. My life would have been so much better. So you're the reason for my problems. And just, of course, kids can sense that something is off. They can sense their parents are not really happy in that marriage or just being a parent in general. And then they internalize that and they say that there's something wrong with me. I am inherently defective. I'm going to try to hide this. I'm going to keep trying to prove myself to the world because I feel worthless inside. And that over time just becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy that they cannot leave as well. So, of course, there are many other dynamics that are at play here. But role reversal is a very, it really stunts a child's development because the child learns that instead of their needs being important, the parents' needs are important, and they never get to develop intellectually, physically, mentally, emotionally as adults because their growth is stunted. Like someone who is being abused or neglected, their growth is stunted at a very young age when they were supposed to develop. So, like, their development was going in a straight linear or upwards motion, but then all of a sudden, like, it veered off. So it went like in another direction entirely, and that just even if a kid is subjected to too much stress on a regular basis, which obviously comes along with the role of being a surrogate parent, just providing all that support to your parent comes at the cost of your own needs. And while it may seem your parent may be loving, nurturing, caring, all these things, they may not do anything that goes beyond, of course, like crossing over. Um, they may just be emotionally like very dependent on you, anxious, and that makes the child anxious and frustrated and angry. And that goes on, but the child is very finds it very difficult to disentangle from that dynamic. And of course, it affects all their adult relationships later on in life. Of course, it is possible to heal from this. It's not easy. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not something that we should expect will happen overnight. That awareness, that ability to have healthy boundaries, to enforce those is going to happen overnight. But it is possible with consistent effort, with realization, with the determination. But of course, the determination has to come from the side of the person who is in this situation, not their partner, not their kids. That person themselves have like has to be convinced and has to be really determined to bring about that change in a consistent manner over time by working on it in a dedicated way. Otherwise, it will be just like working a little on it, falling back. Because of course, like even if you're working on it all the time, you will there will be moments where you fall back onto your default programs and your default codes. So breaking out of that will be a challenge, and um, having sustainable efforts in this regard, professional help, or just realizing that this needs to be a journey that you take for yourself is the starting point to change this dynamic. Let me just refer to my notes and see if there's anything else. So I just wanted to decide what enmeshment is. I've already talked about it, but usually the characteristics are high emotional dependency, um, low boundaries or blurred boundaries, non-existent boundaries. Sorry, I haven't slept, so my throat is also just going. Um, the child feels obligated, um, and then the child becomes a surrogate husband or wife, meeting those emotional needs. The child feels trapped in a too close for comfort dynamic, and then later on, they develop usually avoidance, which means that they feel uncomfortable with emotional intimacy. They may substitute sex for emotional intimacy. In other ways, of course, this may show up in different ways, but then other ways in which it may show up is that whenever they try to enforce a boundary, they feel guilty. They don't know how boundaries work. They've never had boundaries, whether with time, whether with their own relationships. Like if they have a girlfriend or a wife, they cannot maintain these boundaries and realize how to put that person first. Whenever that person makes demands on them, just like normal needs of a relationship, they may get very flustered, want to shut them down, get very agitated, start screaming, crying. Just their old guilt gets activated, and all the repressed feelings that they were not able to express towards their parent comes out a lot of the time. So they start projecting that onto their partner and pushing that onto them because they just feel like, why is this person doing the same thing that I have had to deal with my entire life? They don't have a sense of self, so they don't know how to be in this dynamic in a healthy way. So whenever they're asked to do something, they get really like turned off, pissed off, agitated, frustrated, and they may have difficulty realizing that their new relationship is supposed to come before, above and beyond their role as a caretaker of the family, because they, and like the younger that they took on this role, the more enmeshment there was, the more caretaking they did, the more dependency there was, the harder it will be for them to realize this is happening, and the more ingrained that will be in their subconscious, the harder it will be for them to break out of it. So I'm Satori Sensei, and I create cosmic flow that flings open the doors of your perception. So this is me signing off. Ta ta. See you guys soon.